Welcome to Vision to Value, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how technology is planned, purchased, and implemented in state, government, health, and human services agencies. Each episode explores the real challenges of transformation, from procurement pitfalls to leadership strategies, and provides bold insights to drive meaningful change. Your hosts, Carole, Hussey, and Tony Mathews, bring decades of experience from both public and private sector leadership. Together, Carole and Tony bring unfiltered insights and straight talk on what works, what doesn't, and how agencies and vendors can turn vision into real value. Now let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Vision to Value. My co-host today, Tony Mathews, as always, every week, is with us. And we're going to talk today about a little bit of a different topic. We've been spending quite a lot of time in the last 7 episodes of this podcast doling out a lot of advice. And I think that some folks are feeling a little overwhelmed by all of that. How are we going to tackle all of these things? And, with limited budget and with limited staff and limited staff experience, right? And so we wanted to kind of take today to come at this conversation from a little bit of a different angle and talk about consultants. And so how do you know when you need a consultant and how to engage with them, how to maximize that relationship? And so we're calling this getting the help you need when you need it. And so we're gonna explore that today. So certainly there are times when you need to bring in extra help. You can do that in a cost-effective and flexible way. It doesn't have to be multi-million-dollar engagements, and it doesn't have to be super rigid and take forever with the RFPs and whatnot. So we're going to kind of guide you through how to think about that, because you want to have a good plan in place before you go out and begin to explore identifying those consultants. So Tony, let's start with how you might know that you really need a consultant. At what point should I, realize that I'm going to need some extra help for something?
Well, I think it starts with, when you start planning out whatever the work is you want to do we have what we need in-house? Do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the expertise? Right? Like, do we feel like we've got a good handle on it? And if you do, then you don't need any help. If you feel like we don't know what we don't know, right? Like, what are the best practices? Where, are there states where this same approach has failed? Are there states where this has succeeded? And what did they do to make it succeed? So I think it starts with sort of reflecting internally on, do we have a really good feel for exactly where we want to go and how to get there? Do we have the resources we need to do that? Then that's the first decision tree, question. If the answer is no, we either don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the expertise, or we don't have enough time, as quickly as we need to do this, we can't do it as fast as it needs to happen. Then I think it's time, okay, let's talk about whether or not we bring in a consultant. And then that's the next decision box, right? Is, okay, do we need a consultant? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, if yes, then how much? How much consulting do we need? For how long do we need it? What do we need? Organizational help? Do we need planning help? Do we need expertise? I think that's another piece of it, is understanding the kind of sort of assistance that you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, so, anytime you're updating your APD or your roadmap or you're starting a project, that's a great time to sort of think about that when you're laying out the work that needs to be done and figuring out where those gaps are. But you might also be already down the path with a project and realize, we don't have what we need. Or, we've talked recently about some failing projects. Maybe my project's starting to go south and I'm getting worried. Maybe one of my team members, one of my staff is coming to me, raising the red flag. And they're telling me that, we are working ourselves to the bone here. We are encountering issues that we just don't know how to solve. And sometimes, you just can't see the forest for the trees, right? If you're so deep into it, you might just need that outside perspective. And that could be at any point in your roadmap or in your project when any of those sort of things might come up as well.
Yeah, and the other piece of that too is you've got a lot of different contractors sort of helping you with something, an IT project, and they're meeting you to death. Some of them want to meet, every day. Some want to meet twice a week. Some want to meet every 2 weeks, and you just can't get any traction because the few people you have that are engaged and have the bandwidth to work on these projects can't spend all of their time every day in meetings just because each different vendor sort of requires that, right? To make sure. So maybe you just need somebody to, like you said, you're stuck and you bring somebody in halfway through, and maybe the help you need is, hey, I need you to organize all these meetings. Can we have one meeting where they're all engaged, or can you take some of this off my plate so I can get the work done and get the decisions that they need instead of just spending all my time in meetings. That's another piece of it.
Yeah. Another thing that we've talked about in the past too, and I don't know if we said it quite this bluntly, but maybe you do have a vendor in there that you're working with and they're telling you you need to go do these things or buy this solution or build this thing this way. We get into that a lot with like COTS versus when I customize something or whatever.
Sure.
And maybe I just want an independent advisor. I just want somebody who's not got something to gain, who can tell me objectively what I should be doing, because, I only know what this vendor who and yes, we want you to have trusted relationships with your vendors and all of that. But sometimes it's helpful to have that independent, objective third-party advisor who can give you, maybe they're going to validate exactly what your vendor told you to do. Maybe they're going to tell you other options and the pros and cons of each. So it's really nice to have that other, kind of somebody to bounce things off of to kind of get that other perspective.
It really is. I know it's cliche to say a trusted advisor, but that's really what we're talking about. And you're interviewing this outfit the same as you would a vendor. Like, do they get it, right? Are they trying to sort of fit you into their box on how they do everything? Or are they listening to what your needs are, what your pain points are? And they're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, Carole, right? You don't want somebody to come in and interview everybody. Like, every new vendor wants to talk to 10 people and, organize sort of where we are today and build a roadmap for where we're going, and then we'll start working. Sometimes that works, but sometimes that's not what you need. You don't need another person putting a burden on the team. You need somebody that you can have a conversation with for 45 minutes and they get where your pain points are and how they can help you day one. And
Yeah.
in that instance, and it's a rapport thing. It really is.
Yeah.
I've been frustrated in my previous positions where, they had a methodology for how they like to do things. And that's great if what I need accomplished fits in that methodology.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work for me, then I shouldn't be hiring them, because that's the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
I'm changing what I need, and what the ask is based on what they can deliver, and that seems backwards. So
Yeah, and there are times for a heavy methodology, and there are times when you need something quick and dirty, right? And so, you have to weigh the pros and cons of that, right? Like I need some website updates done, and I recently talked to a number of vendors about that. And the truth is, I just want the updates done. I need this done. I don't need a whole new branding campaign and a 12-month timeline. I just want the updates done because I need to get this done. And so it became very apparent to me pretty quickly, like who some of the folks were that got that and who the
right,
other ones were just pushing their methodology, right?
that's
And
right.
that's not what I need right now. Maybe I will need that in the future and we'll consider them then. But so I think that gets back to sort of really knowing, kind of what you need, where you're at, what kind of vendor fits into that, that need and, being able to help me achieve my goals.
And let's be honest here. And I love that in this format we can say what we want. you got to have some sort of self-awareness too, and leadership to know, okay, where are the gaps, right?
Mhm.
Like, I know, Frank is going to get pissed thinking that, updates or, the coding is slowing us down. But I'm not worried about hurting Frank's feelings. The
Yeah.
coding is slowing us down. Let's bring somebody in that can help Frank's team with the coding.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to be, self-aware enough to know where your real, shortfalls are. And that way
Hmm.
you're not solving a problem politically, trying to be politically correct, not to step on any toes, and it's not going to move the needle
Right.
because you're trying to play nice in the sandbox. The other part of that too is stopping for a fraction of a second to realize, maybe we need some help.
Yeah.
Go through the decision tree. Do we need help? Yes or no? If we do, what kind of help do we need? Figure that out. And then, yes, that's gonna take you a second to do, but it's gonna save you hundreds of seconds on the back end if you do it right. And
Yeah.
I think that's in today's environment, that's the hard part is it's kind of like when you're overwhelmed from a volume standpoint. Your staff has got too much volume and they say they need help. And you say, well, we're going to hire 5 people next month. You're going to have to train them and get them up to speed. And the staff immediately says, I don't have time to train anybody new.
Right.
Well, then it's going to continue to be overwhelming because you're not capable or willing to stop to train somebody to help you with the volume of work that you have.
Yeah.
So pick your poison, right?
Right.
So I think that's the other reality in state and local government too, is being willing to sort of stop for a minute and take a hit as far as timeliness goes to sort of come up with a solution or get some help from a consultant that's going to help you a week, a month, 6 months down the road.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to something you talk a lot about too as a leader is knowing your data, right? Like you, I think you
Yeah.
mentioned before, maybe as a leader, I'm going to say, look, I'm gonna excuse you from all of your timeline metrics, whatever they may be, for the next 2 months, because I know that we're gonna have to get these people trained and up to speed, or because we're having a cyclical volume issue or something like that. And so, that's something that leaders can certainly step in to, alleviate some of those concerns, that your staff might have in order to help you get to that bigger picture thing. Because, if this is a problem that is pervasive, that can't be solved with the resources you have, that is cyclical, like it's going to come back. It's going to keep haunting you. So you have to fix it at some point, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing, as you were speaking, it reminded me that decision making is a commodity. And I think a lot of projects fail or struggle because you don't have the right people in the right seats that are capable and willing to make a decision, right? And so as we talked about sort of the knowing your data, knowing where your pain points are, but it's also the leadership of being able to tell somebody, we're going to take a hit on this metric with the feds, for a month or two, but I'm willing to take that hit and sort of, explain it, right? Or, take the penalty for it because we've got to get on top of this or we're never going to get out from under it. But somebody's going to be willing and capable of making that decision. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how many times you see these big projects. And the problem is the vendor's been waiting for 8 weeks for a decision. Are you
Yeah.
going left or are you going right? Like, I don't care which it is. I just need we're going fast and there's a fork in the road. Somebody has to tell us which direction to steer. And
Yeah.
I don't think that's unique to any one state or any one, corporation or anybody else. That if you've got weak decision making infrastructure, that's going to hamper you making any real progress in your project.
Yeah. And we've talked about, the importance of leadership involvement, like real involvement in a project. And that's exactly why, because I mean, the truth is government structures, organizational structures, there's a hierarchy for decision making. And
Mm.
sometimes people either don't feel empowered to make those decisions or they aren't empowered to make those decisions by nature of their title and their level in the organization. And so if you've got people on the project who aren't empowered to make those decisions, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
So you got to think about that too, because if I go to my leader and, I'm pointing out that we've got all these issues and we need more help, and you as the leader, I should say to you, okay, here are the implications of this problem. If we don't get help, here are the things that are going to, potentially falter. And so then you are informed and you can make that decision. But that the leader or decision making capability has to be there to be able to identify, where those resource needs are, and what the implications are of not addressing them.
And that dovetails nicely with something that I tell the people that I mentor. I frequently talk about managing up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think you alluded to that a second ago, where, you've got to, sometimes your manager doesn't want to make a mistake, or the person you need a decision from wants perfect information before they'll pull the trigger. And sometimes you need to manage up and you need to lay it out like you just mentioned, where, hey, I know I mentioned the last couple of meetings we're short staffed. Here's what the implications are of that being short staffed.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't, get somebody hired, and an offer made by May 1st, then here's what the effect is going to be downstream.
Yeah.
But I freed up, Betty and Tom, and they're going to carve out, 3 hours a day out of their schedule to train somebody. We just have to get HR to send us some people that we can hire. And just, you really do. I empower the people that I talk to, because I'm like, from a leadership position, if I'm not leading the way you need to be led, feel free to, manage up.
Yeah.
And either I'll notice it and I'll realize that I've got a deficiency that you're helping mitigate, or I don't notice it and you can just manipulate me into doing a better job. Either way, it's good for the organization.
That's right. That's right. I love that. Yeah. So, there's a lot of different reasons why you might find yourself in a position of needing some additional help. We mentioned, quite a few of those. The thing we often hear from organizations, leaders in organizations, is even if I need help, I don't know how to get it. I don't know how to bring people in. It's hard. I'm not going to put an RFP out for one person. How can I possibly get some help on this project without having to go down that path? That's a big burden, right? So let's talk a bit about how we might engage, because I think there are some effective ways out there in which we can bring people in once we know we have a good business case to do so.
I think even before that, the different mechanisms for bringing somebody in, I think the self-awareness part, where knowing that I don't know where to start, right? I'm a deputy commissioner somewhere and it seems like we're struggling and I don't know where we're struggling, what help to bring in, where to start, how to hire them. I don't want to do an RFP. That's just more work.
Yep.
I think that starts with either reaching out to your counterparts in other departments that you got a good relationship with, ask them if they've been in that situation, what they did. Or I think people don't lean enough in the IT world on their state CIO's shop, the central IT shop, because you should be able to go to the state CIO or have your CIO go to the state CIO and say, hey, we think we're struggling with this. We're not hitting our timelines. Everybody feels like they're running around busy, but we're not really getting the traction. We think we might need some consulting, but we don't even know where to start. Chances are somebody that's in a position of being the state CIO either has been there, can direct you, or connect you with somebody else that had to do that recently. So I think and this is part of the reason we need consultants, I think sometimes, is we don't know what we don't know or how to proceed. And so you're asking a consultant for help to sort of smooth it out and sort it. You could do that with the state CIO to help you figure out how to get a consultant.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times I think we just don't want to admit what we don't know, and we feel like it's our responsibility to sort of figure it out. And I've never been too proud to leverage somebody else's experience and expertise and say, hey, Bob, I'm lost.
Yeah.
My team is working their butts off. Everybody seems super busy and overwhelmed, yet the results aren't there. Like, it feels like it's just churn without any traction.
Mhm.
And typically, if you ask one or two people that you trust about that, they've been there And they're like, yeah, you need to go talk to this person or talk to that department. And they just came through it and they're on the other side of it now. They'd probably give you some good advice.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure.
that dovetails into the advice they would give you is here are some of the ways that you could hire a consultant if you
Yeah.
decide to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you can certainly tap into your existing vendors and, see if there's a way to subcontract under them if you already have a vehicle. I mean, I think if I were going to do that, I would want to make sure that the thing that I want from that vendor, from that new subcontractor, you know, if I need an independent advisor and I'm subcontracting through another vendor that I already have, they're no longer independent.
That's right.
Right? So you lose some of that. I mean, I'm not saying that, that can't work, but, just recognize that, you might have some of that bias in there then. But there are many other ways. I mean, most states have master service agreements with different staff augmentation companies on it.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard consultants say, I don't want to do that. The rates are too low. But depends on what you're going in for, right? Like,
That's okay. Look, I don't want the vendor that's scared away by the low rates because the consultant I want is the one that realizes that this lower rate opportunity is probably going to lead to bigger, better things. If I do a good job consulting with them, we'll develop a rapport and they'll be aware of the other things I can do besides just that one thing. And it's a foot in the door opportunity.
yes,
But if a vendor's coming in the day one trying to hit their margins, they got to make 40% margins on every hour they spend talking to me, that's probably not the right vendor for me, to be honest. And this is a good message for vendors that might be watching this.
yeah,
You know what? This is state government. It's low bid. And you know what? You're going to have to take a haircut initially to get your foot in the door for other opportunities. And
yeah,
if you're not capable or willing to do that, then you may not be the right fit for most departments.
yeah. And I think too, like it certainly varies based upon whatever the role is, right? Like if I'm bringing in a tester or a business analyst or something like that, those are more, generalist sort of, disciplines, if you will. And so you're competing against a lot of other people in the market. You have to have a low rate for that. If I need a data scientist who understands data modeling for child welfare CWIS systems, that's highly specialized.
Okay.
Most of these MSAs that I've seen can accommodate both. So it just depends what your need is, what the job category is, and that sort of thing. Sometimes you can get around that, but otherwise, yeah, you're right, Tony. I might have to go in lower out of the gate to prove myself, get my foot in the door. And, for a lot of independent contractors that I've worked with, their rate to state and local government sometimes is lower anyway than their rate to private sector firms. And that's because they understand, right, that the public sector cannot pay, those higher rates. So, which is another reason why you might not want to subcontract through your current vendor. Your current vendor might have much higher rates for that person than an MSA.
Well, and the thing is, if everything's going smoothly, you probably are happy with your current vendor. If things aren't going well, that's why you want a consultant.
Right.
So, I know my experience in Tennessee. We had a large outfit that we ultimately went with some of our SI work, but the relationship was built when they helped us sort of figure out what our roadmap needed to be for almost nothing.
Mhm.
It was very inexpensive. We were lucky to get the quality people we did for that initial. Okay, let's whiteboard this thing, right? Let's figure out where you are, where you want to go, right?
Yeah.
If you wrote an article in 2 years about your success, what would it look like, type thing, and then that rapport building and their sort of thought process for how to go about this made us feel very comfortable with them when the time came to hire an SI.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really how you should do it, is sort of get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't want to get through this episode without sort of walking through what you mentioned. MSA, master service agreements. what are some of the other tools that folks can use to hire a consultant? And a good consultant will tell you the tools that you could use to hire
Yes.
them. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the other sort of avenues that people have
Yeah,
besides MSP?
well, if you're talking to a vendor, independent consultant, even, they should already know what contract vehicles are available
Yeah.
to you. Now, I think this is like some people in other industries would be like, that's kind of crazy. Why would your vendor know it, but you don't? But I mean, we have to think about like, there's such a high level of turnover at the executive level in particular, and the CIOs, and a lot of us vendors have been around for a long time. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's part of your business development and due diligence, right? To know what contract vehicles are available. As a woman-owned business, I know that I need to go around and get on those contract vehicles. So you might be able to find that's a one good example of that, right? Like maybe you have some disadvantaged business programs where you can bring people in. A lot of times they'll have a ceiling rate of, the contract can't be more than, whatever X dollars are. It varies from state to state, and you could go direct to those pre-approved vendors, similar to the MSA, that you could go through. There are certainly NASPO, which is the National Association of State Procurement Officers. They have what they call a value point contract, and there are a number of vendors on that contract vehicle that states can use to procure vendors. And so if you're not it's hard to get on that, I will tell you that, but you can subcontract under one of the vendors that are on that. So that's certainly something that vendors should look at, and also state government agencies. If you're A lot of states use NASPO. If your state is not using it yet, talk to your procurement officers. Like they might not even know this thing exists. Just see what it would take to get on it, because that is so easy to use. Um, that's a quick way to do it. And then sometimes there are like grants, or even like rapid advisory sort of different types of vehicles that you can get in. Like in Florida, for example, ITN, invitation to negotiate, that's much quicker than using an RFP. So states sometimes have their own sort of rapid sort of procurement vehicles that can be used for a very specific scope of work. Usually if it's like a small amount of money, small amount of time, it's what it's intended to be. Sometimes they have pre-approved vendors, sometimes not. Sometimes they have to get 3 estimates, sometimes they don't. So it varies, from state to state. But there are always, if you really need someone, if you're a state leader, there's a way to get them in the door. You just have to figure it out.
There is. And again, I think sometimes people in individual departments feel like they don't know, and I don't know where to start. You have procurement people.
Yeah.
Ask them. You have state procurement people. Ask them what are the different avenues available to me. Each state probably has a different threshold for sole source contracts.
Yeah.
Each state has different thresholds for what dollar amount has to go to a fiscal review committee,
Mm-hmm.
for approval. So I think, that's the other thing is I think we need about $60,000 worth of consulting. Well, that's going to give you certain options. But if you knew that the limit was 50, and anything 50 and under, you didn't have to go through these 2 extra steps of approval. Well,
Yeah.
then maybe you don't need 60,000 worth of
Yeah.
consulting. Maybe you could live with 50,000.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece too, is not feeling so overwhelmed with the fact that you don't know procurement, you don't know how to go about hiring a consultant. Reach out to the people that do this for a living,
Yeah.
and just make them have a genuine sort of, transparent conversation about, hey, I want to hire somebody. I need them quick. I need them to be objective. I just want them to do this piece without it turning into something bigger. What are my options?
Yeah.
And I think other people can help you too. But you're right. There's so many options for how you can bring somebody in, that shouldn't be a deterrent to doing it.
Right.
And like I
Yeah.
said, any consultant worth their salt should be able to tell you what all the avenues are. If I
Yes.
want to sell you something and I only take cash, I don't take Venmo, I don't take Zelle, I don't take PayPal. You can't write me a check or use a credit card. that's very limiting. But if somebody says, hey, I'm going to sell you this bookcase and you can pay me any one of these 7 ways, okay, it's easy for me to buy the bookcase from that individual.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And I loved your 60,000, 50,000 example for a couple of reasons. One, I love those short, quick projects because it's a way to test each other out, right?
right,
Without investing a ton of money and a ton of
right,
time, I can bring a vendor in, pay them 50 grand, whatever it is, for this very limited scope of work. And if it doesn't work out, I haven't lost a lot.
right.
Um, but if it does work out and I've created a scope that was 50,000 and they've done such an amazing job that I'm like, oh, wow, I'd love to bring them back to do this other thing that I
That's
have.
right.
I
That's
could
right.
do that and do
That's right.
another 50,000. And
That's
so,
exactly right.
yeah, and that works out nicely because, a lot of state leaders like that because there's not a long-term commitment. As we know, now more than ever, things change in government. And so, you know, a lot of times leaders don't want to, make commitments that are too far out. And this is a great way to show real value real quick. And so I think it plays nicely with the current administration.
It does. And the fact of the matter is, it's very hard for states to ramp up and ramp down sort of expertise. You can't just hire an expert in data analytics for 150,000 and then get rid of them in a year, because you don't need them anymore. But you can
Right.
outsource this expertise without using an FTE, right? You can use
Yep.
money below the line instead of above the line, which is more
Mhm.
flexible. I
Yep.
mean, there's a lot of reasons that you could augment your staffing with this sort of expertise and assistance on a short-term, non-committal level. Um,
Yeah.
it really is a good tool. It's just one more tool in the toolbox, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think I'm sure there are people that overuse it, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
that that's not good. But there's an equal number of people that underuse it, and
Yeah.
it's a real value if they do it right that they're not leveraging.
I agree. I think a lot of times business leaders don't have any idea of all the various procurement vehicles that are available to them.
They
And
don't.
so, consultants out there, you should be learning all these things because it could be beneficial to you. And, the other great thing I've seen these types of vehicles used for too is bringing back former state workers to help
Yeah,
in a pinch. And that's awesome too, because that's a win-win for everybody. A lot of states have their own methods for bringing back retired workers or whatnot.
sure.
But, um,
120 days, sure.
yeah, yeah, but this is also a vehicle you could potentially
It is.
use, especially like if you have a real, you need that expertise and there's so few people that have it. And,
Yeah.
why not?
Well, and most consultants, especially ones like yourself, have former state executives on their teams.
Yeah,
And that's a selling point. Like
it
we've
is.
got a former CIO or deputy commissioner. Like we've got people on the team that know this stuff. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, reflecting back on my career in state government, my biggest blind spot, honestly, was not knowing what was going on nationally.
Yeah.
I didn't have the bandwidth to do my day job and keep everything running the way it needed to, and be plugged into what states had failed, what states were doing it well and succeeding. Like I just had a blind spot for sort of best practice nationally. And my expectation when I did spend money on consultants was I'm expecting you to tell me,
Yeah.
don't just let me do something that has failed 8 times out of 10. I'm expecting you to tell me why, ask me, why do you want to do it that way, Tony? Because
Yeah.
most states have failed. The states that have succeeded have done it this way. Do you want to have that conversation, or are you committed to the first way? And I really valued those types of vendors. That I felt like they were partners
Yeah.
more than vendors, because they kept me from doing stupid things that they had seen fail 80% of the time. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the other thing, is sort of a state leader sort of knowing where your blind spots are and being willing to hire somebody
Yeah.
that can sort of mitigate that for you.
Yeah. It is so important. And then, kind of similar. I had a former CIO who used to say to me, "I don't want to be your guinea pig," right? Like,
Right.
don't
Yeah.
come here and try stuff out so that you can take it somewhere else and sell it 10 times, and I'm your guinea pig. But I mean, we do have to start somewhere, right? So starting small can be the way to do that. I think because of this current environment we're working in, we're going to see a lot of smaller proof of value kind of projects than what we've seen historically, because people aren't going to be able to go out and get another $100 million or $50 million.
Well, the states that don't have much money to spend are going to have to take a chance with somebody who's got a proof of concept thing. We're seeing this a little bit now with CWIS.
Yeah,
Everybody needs to, to update and revise their CWIS, and everybody, most educated executives have said, "Hey, I'm not going to. I was one of those. I'm not going to be your guinea pig.
yeah,
Show me where you have successfully implemented this somewhere else." And with CWIS, there's not a lot of that yet. I
no,
mean, and so I think that's the challenge today is everybody, I think all the vendors are sort of racing to have the best CWIS solution, and all the buyers are like, boy, nobody can show me where they've done it successfully somewhere else. And
yeah,
they're all sort of hemming and hawing, wringing their hands, trying to figure out how to hire somebody to do CWIS. But at some point, you've just got to make the best decision you can at the time you have to make it with the information you have.
yeah, for sure. I
So
think, you know, I could go on all day about CWIS, but
sure.
we're going to definitely be seeing much more like incremental modernization and just kind of slowing it down. And given the way CWIS has been going, I think a pause might not be a bad idea. Like, let's revisit what we're doing here and how we're doing it, and maybe some of this unbiased, objective consulting can help with that. I don't know. Um, all right,
Yeah.
let's kind of like move on a little bit then and talk about, just from your perspective, what are the pros of bringing in an objective, unbiased consultant to advise you? And I'll remind our audience that I actually worked on the state a long time ago, though. But Tony has had somewhat recent experience as a leader in a state government agency. And so, you know, having worn two hats, why do you think states should be really thinking about bringing in this type of advisory service to support those transformation efforts?
Well, I think the most obvious one is to break some sort of a log jam you've got. You know if you're not getting the traction that you hope to get on a project, and you're just stuck, and everybody seems to be working hard, but you don't know why you're not moving. I think that's a pro, right? Sort of break that log jam, let somebody else come in and tell you what you may not be able to see or want to hear. I think augmenting your staff. We talked multiple times about everybody on your team's got a day job, and every new project that comes up is on top of what they were already hired to do. I think it's a good way to augment your staff, and it shows them that you're committed. You've heard their concerns. You can't hire five more people. It doesn't work that way. But I can hire a consultant to take some stuff off your plate. Um, and I think at the end of the day, if you do it right, like we're talking about, you've been self-aware. You know sort of where to focus to sort of break that logjam. I think it can be a real value. I think the 50,000 or 75,000, whatever you spend on a consultant, could save you 250,000 or more down the road, either with just delivering the thing on time and on budget, or avoiding audit findings, or whatever the challenges are that you're having. I think it could be a real value. So, you spend, it's kind of like home maintenance, right? It might cost you 10,000 to have your house painted. That's going to save you 40 or 50,000 in other repairs from having a house that's falling apart. So I think it can be a real value add as well.
Yeah, I do too. And the world we're living in now, everything remote work has become so much more acceptable. It used to be that every state wanted you full time on site Monday to Friday 8 to 5, and but now that's really not that necessary. People are willing to travel, go where they need to go, and because of that, states can get access. You mentioned national expertise. You can get access to the most amazing consultants all over the country who are specialized in whatever it is you're doing. And so that's pretty amazing. You are no longer relegated just to whoever is in your, capital region geography. You can really gain access to such amazing, unbiased expertise.
And that's a good point too. I think the more flexible you can be, the better pricing you're going to get.
Yeah.
If you demand on site, if you demand onshore, if you demand unlimited liability, the more demands you put on an outside contractor or vendor, they're going to offset that. They're going to have to budget for travel. They're going to have to budget for U.S. salaries versus offshore salaries. Like the more demanding you are, and there's sometimes you do want to be demanding, but the
Yeah.
more demanding you are, just know that's going to cost you more.
Yeah.
The less demanding you can be, if you can do it remote where there's less travel, if they've got an offshore, asset that's just as knowledgeable as onshore, let them leverage their offshore assets, right?
Yeah.
Don't demand that they show up in your office every 2 weeks for a meeting. What is that about? Like,
Yeah.
why do you need to physically be in the room with me? We can have the same conversation here.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other piece of this too, is be practical about the way you go about hiring someone.
Yeah, for sure. I used to have a monthly meeting with one of my clients and it never failed. And it was through no fault of her own, right? Like I'm on my way on a plane and, for our monthly meeting and I get a text message on the plane that the meeting's been canceled. I'm like, great, lovely, love
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
that.
That's $1,000 out the door. Yeah.
Yeah, you make the most of it. You have meetings with other people and you do all those things. We don't want to travel for one meeting typically, but yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities available now to get the right help for states for whatever it is they're working. You do not have to struggle alone. There are great consultants out there, big and small, across the country, who bring deep expertise across health and human services, whether it's Medicaid or SNAP or child welfare, or even, data analytics or AI agents, all the things. We're all out here and we all want to help.
Yeah.
So, we hope that, we've helped you, whether you, want to hire, Tony and I to come in and help or someone else. We really hope that we gave you some food for thought today on why
Mhm.
you should just do that. And not continue to, suffer through it. So, any final thoughts, Tony, before we close out?
No, I hope that the people that watch these podcasts realize the value that they've been getting for free. Because to some extent, this has sort of been a little bit of a freebie, I think, for folks. And if you want more of this and more focused on what you're trying to solve for, there's people like us out there that can just focus on exactly what your issue is.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Tony. Yeah. Consultants can be a hugely valuable tool. We all, if we're working in this industry, we care about health and human services. I've never met a consultant who didn't actually really, really care about health and human services. And you can do it. You don't need a massive budget, right? You can do things small, incrementally, and get that help you need when you need it. So, thank you all for tuning in today and listening to our podcast. It means a lot to us. Hopefully, you found some value today as well. We'd love for you to reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk with you about how we might be able to help you with whatever you're struggling with. We'll talk to anyone all the time. We just want to help you work on your transformation efforts. So, thanks for joining. Do go out to YouTube, subscribe to our channel so that you get the updates when future episodes are released. And let us know what you think about the episode today. We're really, we'd love to hear about your consulting wins. No horror stories, please. Just the wins. And we'll see you next time on Vision to Value.